Ever felt like you're not alone? Like something's watching you from the shadows? Get ready, because today we're diving deep into the world of the paranormal. From chilling ghost stories to unexplained phenomena, we're exploring the mysteries that keep us up at night. Are you brave enough to join us? Hit that subscribe button and let's get spooky. Story 1. The Whispers in the Walls. The old Victorian house stood on a hill overlooking the town, its darkened windows like vacant eyes staring out at the world. It had been empty for years, a silent testament to a tragedy that had befallen the family who once lived there. Locals whispered stories of strange occurrences, of lights flickering in empty rooms, and of faint whispers carried on the wind. Sarah, a young writer with a fascination for the paranormal, had always been drawn to the house. She had heard the stories, of course, but she dismissed them as mere folklore, tales spun by imaginative minds. But a part of her, a small, insistent voice, wondered if there was more to the stories than met the eye. One crisp autumn evening, Sarah decided to explore the house. Armed with a flashlight and a notepad, she made her way up the winding path, the crunch of fallen leaves beneath her feet, the only sound in the stillness. The front door creaked open with a groan, as if welcoming her into its secrets. The air inside was heavy with the scent of dust and decay. Sarah moved through the house, her flashlight beam dancing across cobweb-draped furniture and peeling wallpaper. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. As she reached the second floor, a chill ran down her spine. The air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over her. She entered a room at the end of the hall, her flashlight illuminating a faded floral wallpaper and a four-poster bed shrouded in shadows. Suddenly, she heard a whisper, faint and indistinct, seemingly coming from the walls themselves. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Was it her imagination, or was there someone else in the house? She strained her ears, trying to decipher the words, but the whispers were too soft, too elusive. She took a step closer to the wall, her flashlight beam shaking in her hand. "Hello?" she called out, her voice barely a whisper. Silence. Only the beating of her heart filled the void. She took another step, her hand reaching out to touch the cold, damp wallpaper. And then she heard it again, clearer this time, a voice whispering her name. Sarah recoiled, her breath catching in her throat. She spun around, her flashlight beam darting across the room, but there was nothing there. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Again, silence. She felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as if she were being watched. She turned slowly, her flashlight beam sweeping across the room once more. And then she saw it, a faint shadow flickering in the corner of the room, just beyond the reach of her light. She held her breath, her eyes fixed on the shadow. It seemed to move, to take shape, and then it was gone. Sarah stumbled back, her flashlight falling to the floor with a clatter. She didn't wait to pick it up. She turned and fled, her footsteps echoing through the silent house. She didn't stop running until she reached the bottom of the hill, the house looming behind her like a dark sentinel. She looked back, but the house was shrouded in darkness, its secrets hidden once more. Sarah never returned to the house on the hill, but she never forgot the whispers in the walls, the voice that had called her name. She couldn't explain what she had experienced, but she knew that there was something more to the house, something that defied logic and reason. Story 2. The Phantom Hitchhiker. The rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the road ahead. John gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He had been driving for hours, and the fatigue was starting to set in. As he rounded a bend in the deserted country road, he saw a figure standing by the side of the road, thumb outstretched. It was a young woman, her hair plastered to her face by the rain, her clothes soaked through. John hesitated. He rarely picked up hitchhikers, especially at night, but something about the woman's forlorn figure tugged at his heartstrings. He pulled over to the side of the road, the tires crunching on the gravel. The woman hurried towards the car, her head bowed against the rain. She opened the door and slipped inside, her presence filling the car with a chill. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so grateful." John nodded, his eyes on the road. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Just up ahead," she replied, her voice still soft. "There's a small town about 10 miles from here." John nodded again and put the car back in gear. The woman remained silent, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. After a few minutes, John glanced over at her. She was still staring out the window, her face pale and drawn. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The woman turned to him, her eyes wide and haunted. I am a ghost," she whispered. John laughed, thinking she was joking. "Come on," he said. "You're kidding, right?" The woman didn't smile. "I'm serious," she said. "I died on this road a year ago." John's laughter died in his throat. He stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. She looked so real, so solid, but her eyes held a sadness that seemed to stretch beyond the realm of the living. "I don't understand," he stammered. How is this possible?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice filled with despair. "I'm trapped here, reliving the night of my death over and over again." John didn't know what to say. He wanted to believe that she was just playing a prank, but the look in her eyes, the chill that emanated from her, told him that she was telling the truth. They drove in silence for a few more miles, the rain still lashing against the windshield. Then the woman spoke again. "Stop the car," she said. John pulled over to the side of the road, his hands trembling. "This is where it happened," she said, her voice barely audible. "This is where I died." John looked around, but there was nothing to indicate that this was the site of a fatal accident. "What happened?" he asked. "I was hit by a car," she said, her voice filled with pain. "The driver didn't stop. He just left me there to die." John felt a wave of sympathy for the woman. He couldn't imagine the pain and suffering she must have endured. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I wish there was something I could do to help you." "There is," she said, her eyes meeting his. "You can tell my story. You can let people know what happened to me." John nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "I will," he said. "I promise." The woman smiled, a sad, ethereal smile. "Thank you," she said. "You've given me some peace." And then she was gone. John stared at the empty seat beside him, his mind reeling. He couldn't explain what had happened, but he knew that he had encountered something extraordinary, something that defied the laws of nature. He drove on, the rain still falling, but the road ahead seemed a little less dark, a little less lonely. He had a story to tell, a promise to keep. He would tell the world about the phantom hitchhiker, the woman who was trapped between two worlds, seeking justice and peace. Story 3. The Haunted Mirror. The antique mirror hung in the hallway of the old house, its ornate frame tarnished with age. It was a beautiful piece, but there was something unsettling about it, something that made people uneasy. The new owners of the house, a young couple named Emily and Ben, had heard the stories about the mirror. Locals whispered that it was haunted, that the reflection in the glass was not always what it seemed. Emily and Ben were intrigued by the stories, but they didn't believe them. They were practical people, scientists by training, and they didn't subscribe to such superstitions. But as they settled into the house, they began to notice strange things happening around the mirror. Sometimes when they walked past it, they would catch a glimpse of someone else in the reflection, someone who wasn't there. Other times the reflection would seem to move on its own, independent of their own movements. At first, they dismissed these occurrences as tricks of the light or their imaginations, but the incidents became more frequent, more pronounced, until they could no longer ignore them. One evening, Emily was standing in front of the mirror, brushing her hair when she saw a figure appear in the reflection behind her. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, her face pale and drawn. Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't turn around, afraid of what she might see. "Hello?" she whispered. The figure in the mirror didn't respond. It simply stared at her, its eyes filled with sadness. Emily took a deep breath and turned around. But there was no one there. She looked back at the mirror. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed our exploration of the paranormal. Let me know in the comments which story gave you the chills. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more spooky content. Until next time, stay safe and maybe keep the lights on.